Hello people of the web and YouTube, Dude here, and today I'm going to be talking about my giant Game Boy project. Anyway guys, with that said, this project is nowhere near done. I just have the frame built and that's pretty much it, and maybe the window cut out for the monitor. I haven't got around to cutting the glass yet, but anyway, let me get back on topic here. The reason why I'm making this video is to let you guys know why I've been away for so long, and to, well, ask you guys for some help so I can get this project done sooner. That way I can make a video on it if you guys want to see a full build video for this thing. Anyway, what I got right now for this is I was originally going to use an actual Game Boy, you know, kind of do what everyone else traditionally does when they make a giant Game Boy from a normal Game Boy. What they normally do is gut the normal Game Boy and hook that screen up to a bigger screen, and that way you can use original hardware. However, I didn't want to do that. I just couldn't find my Game Boy, and I also wanted to make big game cartridges. That way I could just plug a game in the back via USB instead of the normal kind of connector. That way I can load the games directly through RetroArch from the, the game card, so to say. Anyway, to do what I had planned required me using a micro ATX computer, so I had to rip down one of my old computers I had lying around, and I chose the crappiest one I could, just because it didn't run really great, and all it could run really was some PS1 maybe games, and some Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Color, them kind of games. I wanted to be able to do those three categories of games, so I took that one apart as a guinea pig. I mounted it to a piece of wood, which will sit inside the frame, hopefully perfectly aligning itself with the corner for the giant Game Boy. Now, the reason why I chose this method is it allows me to have an option. I can plug the display either into a giant TV while I'm playing it with the big buttons, or I can play it on the display itself, kind of like an arcade cabinet. Now, the reason why I chose to do it this way with the computer as well is it allows me to use other kind of hardware. As you guys can probably see, I got this wireless keyboard and this USB to joystick converter. It will allow me to use the actual buttons on the giant Game Boy itself, and if I ever wanted to, like program it or put a new game on that doesn't want to work, I have the keyboard to diagnose the problem, as well as to, customize the layout and interface and such. Now, speaking of the interface, I'm going to be trying my best to make this mimic an actual Game Boy, so to say. I'm going to get the computer to start up with booting a video of the Game Boy Nintendo logo falling. That way, it looks as traditional as the Game Boy as I can get it to the Game Boy. The only thing that's going to be different is it's going to be running RetroArch, and I don't think the original Game Boy had a menu of some type, Unless I can make a game menu within RetroArch to mimic another game or something, then I can use that. I don't really know how to put this into words, but hopefully you guys could think of something cool for this aspect. I'm going to try to make it look like the Game Boy, so I'm probably going to use a monotone theme on RetroArch, and if there's any kind of skin already out there available to make it look even more like a Game Boy, I'll get it. However, with that said, how about we actually get onto the physicality of this giant Game Boy, shall we? Anyway, since I don't have a 3D printer and I don't have a CNC machine, this thing is mostly going to come out like a rectangular box in the end. It's all going to be made out of wood. It's just going to resemble a Game Boy from the front, so to say. Anyway, speaking of that, the front of it, I think I nailed it pretty good. Now, I didn't measure it, well, technically I did, but then I changed my mind to use these gianter buttons because I figured I might as well just make a bigger button out of the little buttons I got and use a bigger screen. And when I did that, I boosted the dimensions, but I kinda forgot to boost the width of it, so it's not as wide as a normal Game Boy, so to say. However, it's pretty close, and I think I nailed the actual aspect ratio of the Game Boy, as you guys can see from these pictures, and hopefully the pictures make it look good. I know some of the pictures make it look really bad, but in person, this thing actually looks pretty legit. Anyway, since this thing's made out of wood, I decided to even go a step further and take the computer apart and just mount the computer itself onto a block of wood. And don't worry, before I did this, I tested the computer out and things, made sure it wouldn't overheat or anything, which I expected it wouldn't. Because this computer is only like a 1 gigahertz computer, it's really crappy. You can only barely just get away with PS1 games, like I said, so I figured it either dies or it doesn't die, so I'm just gonna use it. And the way I'm using it is I got it mounted vertically, that way I can add a GPU on if I ever want to, even though it's kinda underkill. The CPU would limit the GPU badly, so I may never throw a GPU on it. However, if I do upgrade hardware, having the motherboard be on a, an actual board which I can mount another motherboard to, it allows me to upgrade it. So if I want to be able to run better systems, better hardware, all it would take is me just unscrewing the motherboard, putting a new one on, putting a graphic card on there, and everything should still fit tolerance wise. I've measured enough of it so that if I ever put a graphic card in, there's space for it. Anyway, before I get hate for this, and I know some of you guys will notice it, I don't have motherboard standoffs on my wooden board, which I have the motherboard mounted to, which is something you would want to do. However, since I didn't feel like waiting 6 weeks for those to show up, I just mounted the thing directly to the wood. Like I said, this computer isn't good, so I don't really mind if anything happened to it, and I didn't really see an issue with it. It all booted up normal, nothing seemed to overheat, so for now, it's gonna go in that way. And speaking of things just going in that way for now, these buttons, as you can see, they look like normal buttons, and I know the labeling shouldn't be there. I'm gonna move the paint down, so to say, and do the letter underneath, kind of like a traditional Game Boy has the letters underneath and not on the button. I just have it painted on for now as a mock-up. Yeah, anyway, these things aren't really buttons, they're just lids I got, and I'm going to be filling them with resin, as you can see, and they should be weighted perfectly enough, that way when you hold it, it isn't gonna, like, feel weird. And the magnets, as you could probably tell, I've been playing with them the whole time. These magnets, the one's gonna go on the 30mm arcade button, and this is just gonna go on top, that way it's held up via the magnet, that way if I ever want to play the game without the big button, or I want to swap in a different button or something with a different labeling, it would be super easy to swap them out, put a different color on, or to just play the game with a normal 30mm button, because once these magnets are on, you don't really feel them when pushing the arcade buttons, I found out. And speaking about the buttons, what about the directional pad? This was my major point of concern, and this is something I want you guys to give me an opinion on. If you guys can think of a better way to do this, let me know. The only way I can think of doing it is if I recess the board and put the directional pad on so everything kind of sinks into itself. I don't know if I could do that, okay? If you guys could think of a better way, let me know. The current way I got right now to get the directional pad to work is to use, hello bug, is to use 4 arcade 30mm buttons, one under each corner of the directional pad, so left, right, up, down, and it's going to be mounted the same way. This, the buttons are mounted via magnet. That way if I ever want to use, a retro kind of, like the normal kind of directional pad, I can easily do that. However, if I want to use something a little bit more standard, or if I just want to use the arcade buttons underneath, I could just pull the whole directional pad off and play it with the normal buttons just fine. Anyway, I'm going to start wrapping this video up, but before I do so, I'm going to talk about the display since I didn't really talk about it much and I don't want you guys getting thrown off from the pictures. The reason why I'm using a smaller display when I could fit such a bigger display in is, I just want to make it mimic the aspect ratio of the normal Game Boy screen as much as I can, and those are typically more square and more in the middle while there's a plastic frame around it. However, in my case, I'm going to be using a plexiglass plexiglass screen, there's the words, and I'm gonna paint around it to mask out everything you're not supposed to see besides the monitor, as well as the monitor frame. The reason why I'm doing it this way is if I ever want to upgrade the display, put a bigger one in or an HDMI one in, all I'd have to do is peel the paint off the plexiglass, undo the smaller screen, put a bigger screen in, and hook it up, and it's pretty much good as new. And speaking of screens, if I ever get bored with playing with the screen inside the cabinet, or well, the giant Game Boy, so to say, I am going to have an HDMI out, either coming out where the power cord comes out, which I don't know if that's going to have any kind of interference or not, or I'm going to have it come out the top where the game card would go and just be able to slide it back in. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at here is this thing is going to have the option to plug into a modern TV via HDMI, so if I want to dual display it, or I just want to kick back, put the giant Game Boy on a table, hook it up to the bigger TV and play it, you know, kind of like a coffee table deal, I could do that. But yeah, there's another one of the flaws I'd like to talk about. If you guys have a better method for this, let me know. I know there are wireless HDMI options out there. I don't know how good they are though, and I don't know if I want to try it. I've never really tried a Chromecast or anything like that, so I don't know if I could push the display over to, you know, a smart TV and play it like that, which that may be an option if the HDMI thing doesn't turn out. However, if you guys got a good idea for how I should wrap the HDMI cord up and store it inside, let me know and I'll try to do it the HDMI cord method, because I'd really like to keep a cord on it or in it at all times. That way if I just take this thing over to a friend's house, I wouldn't have to set up any kind of external hardware. I just have to bring the Game Boy and plug it in and pretty much be good to go. However, with that said, guys, I know this video may have been short or it may have been long. I don't really know. I tend to ramble quite a lot when I do things unscripted. Just forgive me. I am unfortunately out of time though, and my lights are clearly dying behind me, so I think I'm going to leave this off here. But before I go, I'm going to show a quick little screenshot of the Game Boy as it stands right now, and all the hardware I plan to put inside of it, including this USB to joystick emulator, which I'll have to get a picture of later. This kind of came out of nowhere. This was afterthought. I was going to use a USB micro, but I'm going to use this thing now just because I had it lying around, and I don't think I'm going to be needing to reprogram the buttons all too often, so this should be fine. However, like I said, I'm going to leave this off here now. DTPK signing off. Peace. 25 Game Boy games that I've actually owned onto my PlayStation 3, and I don't see anything wrong with it. A little bit better. Anyway, that's iframe removal, and that's basically it for this program.